And good evening, ladies and gents, and we'll get the meeting kicked off here. I'd like to call the City of Colwood special council meeting for Tuesday, January 24th to order. And prior to starting, I would just like to acknowledge that with respect, that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Lekwungen speaking people. And we're honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. May I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Okay. Jensen and Ward. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous, approved. Public participation. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? There's no one registered, but I noticed someone in the audience. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So moving on, there's no unfinished business. New business, we'll start off with service profile of human resources. Over to you, Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Human Resources Department is responsible for developing and implementing policies and strategies to ensure leadership and development of the organization's talent is aligned with collective agreement, legislative requirements, and supports a positive, productive, and psychologically safe workplace culture. Services include recruitment and retention initiatives, compensation and benefits, learning and development, employee relations, labor relations, occupational health and safety, organizational development, and workplace wellness. Council expectations in this area. The city's employment practices and policies are aligned with legislation standards. Our compensation and benefits offered contribute to a positive employee relationship. Professional, diligent, and equitable hiring practices optimize fit of all city employees. Training is used as a recruitment and retention strategy. Employees know the expectations of their jobs and receive regular feedback, performance feedback. Employee relations practices contribute to a positive workplace culture. Administration are seeking amendments to these expectations.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from council? I have one, and that's to do with safety. I don't see an expectation that from a safety point of view that I guess we follow all OSHA. Like I noticed even in the measures, we don't have, I don't know if safety is an issue, but it's always been an issue to me. You know, we look after the employees, they look after us, sort of thing. So this, you know, ensuring that we meet or exceed safety, provincial safety guidelines, something to that effect. You know the wording I want, Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Worship. We will capture a safety expectation.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Please proceed, Mr. Earl. Oh, Councillor Olson.
I'm not sure if these are just really petty, just in the wording for the expectations. But in the first point, could we amend it to align with current legislation standards? To me, it just seems like that we're more current and aware of those employment legislation practices. And then in point 3, professional, diligent, and equitable hiring practices. Can we also add the word inclusive? Because with inclusive, it means that it's making everyone feel welcome and valued. I think that's an important word to add in there. And then in point 4, training is used as a recruitment and retention strategy, but also a method to empower our employees. I think that knowledge is power, so I just thought that might be important to add in there, if everyone is okay with that.
A good comment, Mr. Earl.
If council is supportive, we can make all of these changes.
Anyone have any comments on that? I think we're okay with that. Support. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Olson. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. From a staffing history and forecast, in 2022 saw the addition of a Human Resources Coordinator, and that is flowing through in 2023. And then we've got some stats below, a number of employees, and then we've got some demographics of our employee group and their length of employment with the city. Following that, you can see the number of job postings, our fill rate, our internal only rate, full-time jobs, and the number of union jobs, and then some stats relative to voluntary turnover rate. And with that, I'll turn it over to the team who can walk through successes and challenges.
Just a comment again, like as I mentioned earlier, just it would be, I think it's good governance on our side to understand if how our safety record is. So like a severity frequency index and lost days due to injury might be great metrics to have, if that's possible, Mr.
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't quite catch the first one.
Oh, severity index, your frequency index, the standard OSHA measurements, and lost days due to injury. Thank you. Councilor Ward.
Thank you. Question maybe Mr. Earl or for the HR team, just around the FTEs in HR. Full disclosure, I guess I'm a certified professional in HR, and generally the metrics that BC HRMA and others use is, give or take a bit, but it's around 100 employees to one HR FTE. And, to me, it's a pretty big discrepancy here. And I just, wonder what the thought process is behind, like, are we planning for future state, or is there I guess sort of cross-functional work happening through HR? It just seems that the FTE is aligned with the, well, maybe are misaligned with the number of total active employees.
Perhaps I'll start off and then turn it over to Candace. Council's previous decision to add the Human Resources Coordinator to the Manager of Human Resources, which occurred in 2022, was as a result of kind of the ongoing day-to-day work of human resources was fully occupying kind of all of the bandwidth, and kind of the strategic work of the department. We never got to that. And so the thinking was adding an additional resource would allow the organization to go beyond just the day-to-day recruitment and retention, and move into the kind of the more strategic approaches, which helped us leverage initiatives, which I'm confident Ms. Perkins will talk about, like our Leadership Academy. But Candace, if you want to add anything.
Sure. I think I would just want to highlight within the FTE complement as well that one position is fully dedicated to occupational health and safety as its sole focus. So that is one dedicated position for that as well.
Okay, great. No, I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Councilor Day.
Thank you. And I do apologize because I am going to be kind of shooting from the hip tonight. I have had zero time to look at this agenda prior to this evening's meeting due to unforeseen circumstances. But I just want to add what's important to me, I think, is to have a sense of the history of our organization. So where we have these new performance measures and key stats, and that's new for us this year, we haven't included the detail for 2019 and 2020. But I think, we certainly know the number of employees. We may not know the supporting statistics below that, but I would like to ensure that we keep kind of a look available to us of the trajectory of where we've been and where we're going. And just to add to the previous point on HR. I would just like to note for the new-ish council members here, because human resources up until not very long ago was handled mostly by the CAO. And so we did a really great job of identifying the things that we as council members felt that the organization needed to do. But keeping that bundled in the CAO's position years ago did not yield any results from the goals that we identified. And it wasn't anyone's fault. I'm not finger pointing. I'm just saying that we had unrealistic expectations of the people that we had. And so human resources, at least in my opinion, is still doing a lot of catch up from many, many years where we were unable to do, performance evaluations, even of our senior staffs. So I think we're working to achieve goals that were maybe identified as long as 10 years ago still in terms of our organization. And I think I have nothing but good things to say about the direction that we're going in.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison.
I was just wondering if you guys have a yearly performance review of staff, or like within each of the departments that like your manager would sit down with you and go over your performance and that sort of thing. Is that something that's done in the city?
Yes, that is an expectation of managers doing that with their employees annually.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Over to you, Candace.
All right, thank you. So looking at the successes of the past year, I won't likely go through all of them, but I did want to speak to a couple things in particular. And this sort of aligns a little bit with Councillor Day's comments on catch up, and that there's a number of policies listed here as updated. And I do need to clarify that it was, when this document was prepared, it was anticipated that these would be updated. They are, updates are being drafted. We haven't fully completed the updates on all of these policies, with the exception of the communicable disease prevention policy that has received a lot of attention, as you can imagine, over the last year in its various evolutions, couple years, I guess. So these will be attended to in 2023 and completed. And then I did also want to mention the employee satisfaction survey, the last bullet there, that has been conducted. Results are pending for 2023, but soon this year. And but I thought I'd share that we did have, I think, a reasonably healthy response rate. We had a 59% response rate from employees. And we also included our volunteer firefighters in this process, and we had a 53% response rate for those. Of course, we always appreciate even higher response rates, but for this type of activity, in my experience, that's a pretty healthy response rate. Any questions on any of those items before I move on to challenges and opportunities?
Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So on to challenges and opportunities. We just have a few here. And as we've sort of alluded to already this evening, operational pressures versus strategic advancement continues to be a challenge. Operational pressures sometimes are difficult to anticipate. And so wherever possible, our team works very proactively to try to get ahead of things. And sometimes we need to work reactively when unanticipated issues come up. So that sometimes delays our some of the strategic work, such as updating policies. Resourcing and recruitment challenges. These have been ongoing definitely in the last couple of years, as you've seen from the stats. in fact, our 2022, at October 25th, we listed there, it was a total of 37 postings. We actually closed out the year at 44. So a little under 2021, but still significantly over previous years. The labor market has been challenging, to say the least, over the last couple of years. I was a little surprised by that during a pandemic, but we're seeing a hint of a little bit of a shift in terms of the number of applications we're starting to see again for some of our competitions. But definitely some of those mid to senior level professional positions and some of the more specialized positions as well continue to be very, very challenging to recruit for, and even, getting the applications in. So we continue to find creative ways to reach those who might be interested in our opportunities. And then finally, organizational and leadership development. So that is something that, the city is really trying to increase our workforce capacity and develop our leaders or upcoming leaders as well. So for example, Leadership Academy that Robert mentioned, and evolve our workplace. So some of this organizational development initiatives that we're taking on to sort of ensure our workplace is growing in a healthy and contemporary culture.
Just a quick question on my side, a couple questions. First one is, I just noticed the number of job postings. It doesn't, maybe you can explain this. It doesn't align with our turnover rate. Like we have a lot of job postings, yet the turnover rate is, say, around 10%. So is that because it's new jobs that are included?
Not always new jobs. Sometimes we have seen a few departments sort of reorganizing things, and as a commitment to transparency and opportunities for our internal employees, will sometimes post positions that come available through change and transition. So that would include some internal opportunities that would be filled by internal employees.
Okay. Makes sense. So second question is, so is this turnover rate typical? Yeah, or are we high, or because it's expensive, right? Every time we replace someone, right? That the expense of that is so tremendous. It is not really measured by any organization, but I remember commissioning a study, and I remember the cost of it was just tremendous. So is this typical of municipal government around this sort of attrition rate, a voluntary attrition rate, 10%?
That's a good question. It's I don't have comparators of some of our regional comparators in terms of municipalities. Generally speaking, I think I see turnover rates, in Canada, sort of anywhere between 7% and 16% that are considered accurate. So we're kind of right in the middle of that.
Okay.
We certainly were a little bit higher through 2022, and nearly half of our regular employee departures in 2022 were retirements. Also not terribly surprising coming out of a couple of years of pandemic restrictions and things. I think, that was to be expected, because we were a little lower in some of the those years during the pandemic. So.
Right. Okay, super. And I guess just the last question I have related to that, I guess, is I know you probably do exit interviews being typical HR. So is there a trend that we should, or do you watch that and do you take corrective action on your own? I probably know the answer, but it'd be great to hear from you on what you have to say. Is there any trends that you see right now? Are we doing something wrong?
Trends, I would say, generally it's individuals looking for other opportunities. So as I mentioned, there were some retirements that we said, which those are part of the reasons for departing. Others is often other opportunities, often at other municipalities locally. So we have that, where it comes to an advancement opportunity, maybe it's not coming forth here at Colwood. But generally speaking, in exit interviews, the Colwood employment experience is generally favorable is the feedback that we get.
I think that's great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Please continue.
All right, so I think we're on to 2022 priorities. So again, I won't necessarily go through all of them, but happy to take questions. I did want to note the third bullet in references our compensation philosophy. And so this has been developed, not quite implemented yet. This would be the city's first formal compensation policy, and it's pending bringing it forward to council, which will probably come forward to you hopefully in the next few weeks. And then the third to last bullet regarding development of a flexible work arrangements policy similar to the other policies. It is drafted, working through needs, the consultation stage, but it's not actually complete as it indicates there. So we'll call that in progress and bring that forward to 2023.
Okay.
All right, so I'll move on to 2023 priorities. So in addition to those things I've pointed out that are coming with us into 2023, the top 3 priorities in HR are listed as the top 3 in priority order here. So that's development of a respectful workplace policy. Secondly, reviewing our membership in the GVLRA to assess, whether this remains a suitable and cost-effective benefit for the city. And thirdly, we're planning to prepare the organization to pursue core designation, so certificate of recognition through the BC Municipal Safety Association. So, this is an initiative to leverage our existing strong culture of workplace safety and to continue to expand our workplace safety knowledge and commitment and benefit from ongoing reduction in workplace injuries and accidents, and also incentive payments from WorkSafe BC, so it can help lower some of our premium costs as well. And so that is a fairly large initiative, I think. And so again, the plan is to prepare this year and hopefully seek that designation for 2024. Any questions?
Questions, council? Any questions, comments? Seeing none, over to you, Jen.
Thank you. With respect to the core operating budget to support the human resources function, approximately 85% of this operating budget supports the 3 staffing positions that were outlined earlier this evening. I do want to highlight the city's training and professional development budgets are decentralized. So we do have that funding scattered throughout the organization with each specific service area. That said, we do maintain a nominal amount for when we do offer up corporate-wide sessions within this budget here. As well, there is approximately just shy of $20,000 included within this operating budget for consulting services, should they be required, typically reactive in nature, unless identified as an initiative that Candace just outlined. Beyond that, pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Council, any questions? Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify on the core expenses related to new service levels. So previously we were, talking about the number of employees working at the city over time, and that has largely been driven, I believe, by the expansion of new development in Colwood, creating a need for a larger administration. So I'm just wondering, there's none identified. Is that, does that really fit with what's been happening with our history of, more population, more needs, more services, more employees. But we're not identifying it. Is there a reason why it shows up that way?
Certainly through the chair. That's a great question. I'll preface this by saying the intention of the new service level operating expense on a separate line item is to tie specifically to that service area. And then in general, when we draft these budgets, if there is an increase in resourcing required to provide existing service delivery, which may arise as a result of growth in the community, that is considered core and typically isn't separated out for separate consideration. The draft budgets that have been before you, we'll actually get to one in the next session for policing, where we have separately disclosed for previously approved budgets, the incremental cost of increasing, in that case, policing strength. So to directly answer your question, where we believe there's a direct cost associated with a change in the service delivery or an increase in the service delivery, we will separately show that out. And where there is an increased cost associated with existing service delivery, we will always speak to that. And depending on what is driving it, it may or may not be separated out. So for these budgets, for the most part, there was no proposed service changes with these draft budgets, and nor do we have new costs that have been separately identified.
Yeah, I think as, I realize that like everything else in the city, finance is on a trajectory trying to take steps towards improving the way we provide information. So maybe tuck it away somewhere. I'm not looking to make a nightmare for anybody here, particularly for this year, but in future years, I think that's something that we should be trying to, maybe it's not going to be in every graph and every subject, but maybe it's something that comes at the beginning or at the end of our process where we just acknowledge that even to maintain our core services, with a growing community, they are more every year.
Thank you. If I can, Your Worship.
Please, Mr. Earl.
Earlier in the service review in the parks area, we identified additional employees that were believed to be coming on stream in the future as a result of just what you're describing. And so when the municipality takes on new infrastructure such as parks or a road, over time, that accumulation will cause us to need to have greater hours in that service area to provide that service. So we sometimes have to guess where those are going to land, and we use council's expectations as articulated through service review to help us distill, recognizing we need additional hours to provide the same level of service where we focus those hours, whether it's on a park or a road or infrastructure. So we did identify some in parks. We're not currently identifying any in the human resources area.
If I may, just to add to that, we explicitly identify where there are new costs associated with any new infrastructure. So whether it be parks or other capital that's coming online, that information is presented in its entirety when we get into budget deliberations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize, Jen. I missed the vote for questions previously. So just one thought, and I did review this again and didn't notice anything on grievances and not the specificity of how many or what we have going on, but I think it's a metric that's important on reporting out to us, because I believe there's value in understanding the ongoing relationship between staff and management. And it wasn't that many years ago that we had what I would describe as to be more than you would anticipate for what might be expected for a small workforce of this nature. So guess it's more of a statement. I apologize, but I'd love to see some metrics as far as numbers and how many resolved, how many ongoing, that kind of idea. For next year would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Earl, is that work? Okay, great. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we're looking for council to affirm the 2023 priorities as described by Ms. Perkins. The top three are the top three and a maintained level of service.
Okay. Can I get a motion? Councillor Jensen, Councillor Olson, seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Move on to policing.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City of Colwood contracts with the provincial government for policing services. The provincial government has contracted with the RCM, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, for the provision of policing services. The West Shore detachment of the RCMP is jointly operated by the City of Colwood, the City of Langford, and the Town of View Royal. This detachment serves View Royal, Langford, Mechosen, Highlands, Songhees, and the Esquimalt First Nations, in addition to the City of Colwood. Expectations in our policing service area are unbiased and respectful treatment of all people, enhancement of public safety, timely and effective policing and emergency response services to our community, proactive policing, enhance the safety of streets, positive public relations and visibility, cultural sensitivity, partnership and consultation, efficient and effective use of resources, proactive approach to increasing mental health related calls for service, and having the optimal number of frontline officers per capita.
Okay. Council, any questions, comments, any edits? Councillor Dane.
Thank you. I would just like to add an expectation of appropriate services for youth in our communities. And that's just coming from my knowledge that we're stretched thin in that regard. There's a real lack of services out there. So I think that's something that we would dearly like to see, is an enhancement of the services that we can provide specifically for youth.
Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll capture that.
That's very good. Thank you. That's excellent, actually. Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson.
I was just gonna carry on from what Ms. Day was saying, was that maybe more youth outreach. I think maybe that's the word. I don't know if that's where you were going with it, but perhaps setting an expectation of increased youth outreach in the community as a whole, perhaps.
Councillor Day.
Yeah, just to illuminate everyone, regionally, there's the Mobile Youth Services Team, which was originally envisioned and put into place about 2003, 2004. And the vision started with one police officer, was supposed to be joined by a team. The team never materialized. And that Mobile Youth Services Team has been supplemented with a counselor from Pacific Center Family Services Association to provide kind of the both sides of that coin. They work from Sydney to Souk with 2 individuals allocated to this entire region. And so I'm not looking to pressure anyone's budget, but I'm looking to work with everyone who participates in that to try to build a better system. And the Hulatan village concept that we've endorsed is going to help a little bit with that, I think, bringing more resources to the table. I also work with the BC School Centered Mental Health Coalition who work province-wide to try to look at best practices everywhere else and bring forward things that both the province and the police services throughout BC will find beneficial.
Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Ward.
Just for clarification, because I know it's an issue of the day where the Human Rights Tribunal has suggested removing police liaison officers from schools, and some jurisdictions have acted on that. I personally oppose that, but that's irrelevant. I just think in terms of this expectation, does that include council? Almost a two-way thing that, you know, if we're asking or expecting the good folks over at the RCMP to provide you services, that we will also kind of commit to maintaining the commitment to those kind of things. You know, or, you know, I don't know quite what I'm saying there. It's kind of on the one hand, I don't want to say we have an expectation that the RCMP will work with youth, and then we turn around and proverbially put a knife in their back and say you should come out of all the schools. So how we word that, I don't know, but I think it's important that we also demonstrate a commitment the other direction. I don't know if that leads to anything, but that's my 2 cents.
It's a great comment, and it's very big. It's I think I was talking with Superintendent Preston about this, about, you know, what can we do to on the preventative side, right? You know, before they become, you know, before it becomes a problem, right? So I think that's where you were leaning, Councillor Day. So and, you know, whatever that may be, you know, we will have to, if they come back to the table and say we need this funding, then we'll bring it back to the table. And I think we would look at it specifically. So I think that's where my head is. It's you know, an ounce of prevention now, it's going to cost, you know, certainly going to cost a lot less than the future problems that we may have. So, Councillor Day.
I'm trying really hard to restrain from getting into the weeds on this one, because I know that's not tonight's subject matter. But I will just put a pin in it to say I've done quite a bit of research on that. I can share what I have. And it might be something that this council will want to look at for those resolutions whose deadline is coming up very quickly before we get away to the newly elected conference. There are a number of UBCM resolutions on this matter. Whenever you talk to school districts, you'll hear a lot about how important those school liaison officers are. And it's in Victoria where they have been removed from the schools. It has been a huge loss to the Victoria School District and to the mental health programs that exist there. So I'm sure there's work to be done. I will just let you know that if you want to take some concrete steps forward, UBCM might be the best place for that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the next page, you'll see staff position history and forecast. You can see continued growth from 17.6 police strength in 2019 and continue to grow through 2027. The estimate for growth that we've used in this chart is assuming we try to maintain a 1 to 900 population ratio, and assuming we continue to grow at about 500 new residents per annum. That's what drives this chart. At this point, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Preston, who can talk about the performance measures and key stats through this document, as well as potentially reference the policing resources appendice number 2. And I believe he's got additional materials that are coming your way.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Your worship, council, thanks for having me this evening. Second night in a row here. I'd like to just start by piggybacking on Councillor Day. Your comments resonate with me tremendously. In fact, I spoke with Mr. Mayor a number of days ago about this very thing. And that's why I want to start with youth, because I think that's the most important thing in our community. I couldn't echo your comments and your sentiments anymore. We have seen a significant issues with our youth, a lack of services, and anybody with any forethought can see the snowball and the cause and effect of that. The mental health component, we've seen more violence in our schools. I will gladly say that I have a fantastic relationship with the school superintendent, Scott Stinson. They are happy to have us in School District 62. And we have a fantastic relationship with the students, with the staff, and we've been able to mitigate a lot of issues, including some violence, some very serious violent incidents, which is incredibly saddening. These individual incidents are literally, students are being removed from schools. They're leaving their homes as a result of this just because of the trauma and the mental health. I've been trying to work with and trying to figure out with Langford and obviously previous councils as well, some issues on how we can best serve our youth, including, we're all part of the Village Initiative, trying to figure and bridge some sort of path here and come up with a center for youth or some ideas, some mentorship, a Boys and Girls Club. To that end, we've been taking kids to, we formed a great relationship with the Grizzlies Hockey Club. We've been taking underprivileged youth and some other groups and just some general youth outreach to these games. And that's the sort of thing. 2 weeks from now, we have our youth basketball game. It's 16 teams. It's going to be ginormous, again, trying to make those inroads with the youth. So to stay on track here, the MIST, when we talk about the youth, we have the Mobile Youth Services team. You guys also contribute to a local, I don't want to call it a MIST, but it's a similarly aligned program where Pacific Family Services, yourself, Langford and View Royal, pay for another counselor. And they partner with our community policing staff. And they work with a lot of at-risk, especially some females that have been sexually exploited. And that we've seen a tremendous amount of that, especially with the internet and some of the extortion tactics and what have you. So that's been a tremendous success working with them, and we hope to continue with that program. The priority for this year is to stand up. There's two priorities that I have in this detachment. One is to put another member into our sex assault unit, our special victims unit. We are inundated with child pornography and with sex assaults. We need to do a better job of providing a service to our victims, to our clients, and I'm committed to that. The second priority is to stand up a mental health team. We are, you look at other communities, I would say we're actually behind, and that's probably my fault for not trying to stand this up sooner. We've had lots of priorities when it comes to violence and community policing and trafficking and just frontline policing and fielding calls. But I think we're at the point and the size in our community. We all know that there's a lack of services available. We need to address that. So the idea this term, this fiscal year, is to stand up a mental health team comprised of a minimum of 3 RCMP officers. And we'll be looking to do similar to what Vic PD has done. We'll be reaching out to our provincial counterparts, asking for nurse practitioners and whoever else we can to help facilitate safe outcomes so we don't end up with tragic circumstances. So that was the component on youth. As we scroll through the document that you've been provided by your CAO, the staffing position and history forecast, unfortunately that has been changed since last year, and it's the projection for the 5 years is dramatically reduced the number of police strength. I provided you with a copy which formulates previous last year's projections. And we can come back to that after we go through some statistical data here and some questions and Q&A. So this year, I see that there's a 3%, 114 extra files, 142 founded files in Colwood. These are all Colwood statistics. The alarming statistic here is clearly the violent crime. And so from January to November, our criminal analyst advises me that we've had a 41% increase of 65 files of violence in your community. That is substantial. And again, that is why, the mental health, I have no doubt mental health and youth are serious contributors to that number. I don't think it's in isolation, but it's certainly a strong contributing factor. So, and stats can obviously be skewed when you talk about, X number or this number. When we're talking 36, according to page 3 here, 36 extra assaults. We went from 64 in 2021 to 100 in 2022. And I know that Colwood was one of the safest communities in the country and proud of themselves on that. And I want to get us back to having that type of record. Property crime, I'm happy to say that I know our property crime unit has done a phenomenal job, and I appreciate you've probably seen a lot of the media releases with some of their successes. So they deal with your property and prolific offenders, the ones that are the minuscule amount of individuals that have no problems going around breaking into cars, businesses, and of course your construction sites and your local businesses here as well. Mischief to property, again, it's up 41%, so that's nine incidents. So although that's an alarming percentile, in the grand scheme of things, it is 9 incidents. It's still something to keep an eye on. Shoplifting, and there's one where, again, when you start looking at some of these statistics here of other criminal code, shoplifting, and some of these other ones, I think, again, mental health plays a dramatic factor in some of this stuff. Our CDSA, again, we have a full-time drug section. So in 2018, when I first got here, we were inundated with lots of violence, lots of drug and property crime. You invested at that time in policing. So did Langford substantially. So did View Royal. You'll notice that during those times, your statistics came down. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic formula other than it's kind of common sense that if you put the resources towards it, we'll be able to combat, these significant issues, especially the violence. And so again, I'm proud to look at when I look at these stats here with our CDSA, which is our drug stats. With the fentanyl, everything else, our drug section and property crime section have absolutely hammered organized crime. In fact, the sources, I've been told from our counterparts at Vic PD that have sources that say, don't come out to the West Shore because, basically they'll investigate you and they'll hammer you. So those are great. Those are great sentiments. We like hearing that because we don't want some of these less desirable individuals in our community. But again, I go back to the mental health, and you're looking at a 10% increase. And I'm sure just from driving around the community, you're starting to see more and more people that are down on their luck, clearly have mental health issues, and we are seeing it day to day. Our check well-being, you look at that again in mental health, it's up 30% increase. Our suicidal persons, 36% increase. And that was from January to November. I think we had an increase here of the sexually based crimes. And this is one statistic here that's not on yours, but it's on mine here. I pulled it off. I had the analyst pull it today. So sexual assaults, we investigated 14 in 2021. 2022, we investigated 26. So 14 to 26. 86% changed, file count of 12 different. Sexual interference, we went from 3 to 5, 67, and child pornography. We weren't hit near as bad here as some of the other communities, but we did go, have 2 files last year. The amount of work that goes into those files is incredible. You have to, first of all, locate the images. The images are identified on the internet. We have a team in Vancouver that oftentimes they'll be able to track these images. They bring them forth to us. They say that this image has now been transmitted through the internet. We have those images flagged. They're not new images, they're flagged. And so when somebody sends it from one computer to another, it sends a flag to us. We then get that, we identify an IP address. From there, you need to do a workup on the residence of the individual. You need to get a search warrant for the residence, and you need to get a warrant, and you need to get into those devices, which is incredibly complex, password protected, all sorts of self-destruction things on these things. We have an in-house technician that does that, a civilian member. That one's paid for by Langford, but it doesn't matter. You guys are all integrated, so you all share that resource. But it's that position in itself with the technology is about $200,000. But the amount of time, the volume of work that goes into one of those files is tremendous. And so I can't emphasize enough when we look at the increase of 12 sex assaults and 2 child porn files, that's a lot of work to investigate. So with that, if you don't mind referring to resources, this page here that I think the CAO has also provided that to you in his in your manual there. But it just goes to show just kind of where we are statistically in comparison to the province. And I fully appreciate that every community is different. The needs of every community are different. The demographics are different. I also appreciate that, our cop to pop, if it was, compared to a standalone detachment, I would suggest we don't need as many because we enjoy the benefit of integrated services. You guys integrate your services, which is a huge efficiency when it comes to police resourcing. So the fact that you're integrated with View Royal, Langford, the province, Songhees and Esquimalt and Metchosin, those are all efficiencies that we realize, and I think you need less. But I am concerned your cop to pop here is, according to this, 1 to 1,006. And the previous council, we had aimed for, with the mayor and myself, I was confident that he shared that with the other council members, was 1 to 875. I know Robert, the CAO here, has 1 to 900. I think it's fairly negligible either way, but we have been using 1 to 875. View Royal has adhered to that. Langford gives more because of their population, and we have a stacked, you can see on the population, I worked that out with the previous mayors, a cop to pop ratio, which increases as your population densifies. We also appreciate that cop to pop's not the be all and best practice, but when you're dealing with an integrated detachment, trying to find a metric that everybody agrees upon is very difficult. And I'm open to anything, absolutely anything that if you can convince the other 7 communities to agree on. This seems to have worked very well. And anyways, to that end, I was obviously disappointed when I saw that the recommendation is to not increase the services, despite the fact that your population is certainly increasing. And in fact, I've used the wrong statistics. I used, if you look at the population and you refer to this chart here, I believe, is that 2021 or 2 there, sir? Sorry?
Yeah, that's 2022, I believe, right?
That's an inflated 21 number. So
2022, okay. And so I've got 2022 as 18,961. And I'm using that as a cop to pop ratio. Again, there's no magic formula. This is just to give a gauge that every community contributes the same amount of resources and enjoys the benefit of having an integrated detachment. The worry that I have is when one community decides that they're not going to, for whatever reason, this is where the fractures happen, and you've seen it in Vic and Esquimalt, you've seen it in Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam. There's copious examples of where this does not work when one partner does not, contribute the same as others. What I am asking is that we go back to the 1 to 875, and that, I'm cognizant that this is a big commitment, and I'm asking in principle, and I'll leave it to mayor and council to decide if they want to ratify that with this council and the other councils, just so that you can enjoy 4 years of fight-free environment with your other partners. But I am asking that, when you look at the statistics, that the police for 2023, 1,943 individuals in your community would equal 22.2 police officers. So this is saying 2023 at 1,943. And again, I don't know the demographics, and these are inflated, you say, Robert?
Sorry?
These are inflated on the.
The 19,857 is an estimated from the 21 census to the 2.5%.
Yeah, and I guess what I don't see on this policing report is the populations on the staffing history.
Sorry. For this report, we have assumed an approximate annual 500 additional people per annum.
Do we know the start point then? What your start point would be for 2022? Year for population?
We're estimating 19,857.
Okay. So that being the case, it's probably even more police officers than what's on this document. But over time here, if it's 500, you'll see that you'll actually catch up to, ironically, in 2026, the exact amount of if you ended up with 2,929 people, which is only another 1,000 people by 2026. So I don't know that that's. I would suggest that you might have a population greater than that. So all I ask is that council give strong consideration to keeping in line with a cop to pop ratio of 1 to 875, is the same as View Royal, and Langford's 1 to 750 as per the thing. And I'm happy to adjust. And make no mistake, this isn't my decision. You decide the level of policing. I just execute with the resources that you give me. So, if you tell me that mental health and youth is a priority, and I get the resources, I will dedicate those resources to mental health and youth. But as population increases, violence increases, obviously we have to respond to first, to everyday calls, to frontline calls. And that's the priority. Frontline policing is always the priority in policing. And then after that, it's a luxury and trying to keep your community safer. It's you're augmenting the front line. And I would like to augment our front line and our community with a mental health team, but I need your help to do that. And I need the resources to do that. So I'll probably stop there, and perhaps I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to council here. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Superintendent, for coming back 2 nights in a row. I guess I had to be here. This is good, and I understand that sometimes this is like nailing jello to the wall. And I mean, we all have different figures in our minds as far as population, but quite frankly, it's all within 1,000 people, give or take. We anticipated the last census that our population would be beyond 20,000 people. We're not quite there yet. So these things are fluid. And I agree with you. I thought that somewhere along the way we'd agreed at the council of the day had agreed at a ballpark figure of 875. I get it, 875, 900. I mean, we can't conjure up a quarter of a police officer, I guess. So, it might be a rounding error or what have you. But I was of the impression that we had lengthy discussions about perhaps the previous budget year, Jen. I'm not sure about anticipating or forecasting 1 officer per year over 4 years. Have we backed away from that commitment now, or are we planning otherwise? Or
I think when we last year's document showed one additional officer per year based on an assumption we'd be growing, our 21 census would come in higher and we'd be growing faster. And so assuming we're targeting to gain an officer either at 1 to 875 or 1 to 900 from where we are today, that would be approximately an officer every 2 years. If, however, you wanted to jump immediately to 1 to 875 today, that would be 2 additional officers in 2026 to get to that point, and then an additional officer approximately every 2 years.
If I could, you know, my ask is not, like, I appreciate there's lots of demands on council, especially a new council. I'm not asking for 2. I'm asking for 1, and to slowly get to, and in fairness, which I was not, which I wanted to mention, just to be completely transparent and fair, is that you are over contributing in our formula with the other ones in your municipal staff. It's 1 point, we figured it out, it was 1.8 or something like that. So in fairness, you can't be asked, I can't be coming here asking you, hey, you know, toe the line on this one, but you're over contributing here. So, I mean, I have the luxury of seeing top down how everybody contributes. I don't pick favorites. I try to make this as fair as possible because I realize that if we're transparent and fair, the less chance of fracture in a relationship. And so to that end, if you did the previous financial forecast had us at 2025 being normalized. I believe it was 2025 or 2026 was being completely normalized both ways. So you'd be able to have the appropriate number of municipal staff with the appropriate number of police officers, and nobody's paying more or less. And this has been an incredibly hard feat, you know, and I think your worship, I think you remember 5 years ago, it was not a peaceful bliss when I first got here. There was a lots of, well, I'm not adding a position because they're not adding a position, and I'm not adding, you can tell they add positions, we're not adding positions. And we ended up with a lot of violence, and that's it took some serious incidents before people go, okay, well, you know, we're going to do it anyways. And then everybody came to the table and we came up with a metric here that seemed to be agreeable with everybody in principle. It wasn't ratified. But then everything was peaceful for 4 years here. So I don't want to get back to a place where we've now, you know, it's a reduction of 2.5 members is what this forecast has. So you are reducing your level of service, your policing service by doing so. You can't have your population go up and not keep up and say that you're keeping the same level of service. Again, you know, my initiatives, I'm not asking for 2 members. I'm asking for 1 member for next year. Just to go back to the plan, and just as you guys have a plan, I also had a plan in, you know, a policing plan to start up the sex assault, the special victims unit last year, and the mental health team this year. Again, I have to always remind myself that the level of service is your decision, not mine. I do get a little bit entrenched in that, obviously personally involved, and I want to provide a great service, and I want to make sure that we can take care of some of these youth issues, but ultimately that's up to you. So I'm back.
So I do appreciate that and your candor. I think from this side of the table, I look at this and I feel like it's time to possibly contribute another officer, but specifically you said next year. So are we talking 2024? Are we talking about the 23?
Sorry, I apologize. No,
Okay.
For the 2023, 2024, the RCMP uses till April of the fiscal year. So yes, this budget year.
Thank you. And then, but you appreciate that these fluctuations year over year of our population, you know, where we thought we'd be, you know, in excess of 20K and we're 19,500 or whatever when the census came out. So our estimates of population growth really are just that. So us committing to an officer 5 years from now, I have some difficulty with. A year over year examination of the statistical increases, I think that's certainly achievable and maybe looking ahead a couple of years, but who knows what the population is going to be in 2027. We have some estimates, but we've been guessing high along the way. So
absolutely. And that's, like I said, I think year over year, but based on these conservative numbers of 1,943, which does not reflect that number there, you're at 22.2. And I'm asking you to get me a 21.6. So I'm not asking to fully fund this and error, in my favor or in the RCP's favor in terms of resourcing. I'm just asking you to keep up with, I think, what a reasonable person would conclude is probably your population. You're in and around 20,000 people, and that's what you're going to be this year, in and around 20,000 people. Anyways.
Thank you for that. And I do find myself in agreement, but I think you understand this side of the table here. Like I say, it's trying to nail Jello to the wall somewhat, as far as lock these numbers in. A few small things from your report here. How do you feel, or sorry, how do you view the upcoming decriminalization of possession offenses in the province of BC impacting your drug enforcement? Because I see the number one crime type is possession.
Number one crime type
For our community, sorry, in relation to the drug offenses. I believe it was 77% of the drug offenses.
Well, I think
so hang on, because I don't see it yet either, but if you find the one page that refers to drug offenses, you got property crime, and then you have other criminal
Border
code,
control, drug and substance.
CDSA offenses. There we go. Drug possession accounted for approximately 77% of the Controlled Drug Substance Act violations. I guess the
well, I
question
can assure you that our priorities are certainly not drug possession at all. In fact, we've aligned ourselves obviously with the federal government, and we will start to. This is a situation where we are, and we continue to be looking for the dealers, the traffickers that are preying on these victims, these people that are addicted to fentanyl and cocaine and a hard illicit drugs. I can assure you that if there's anything possession, it came to us by probably inconsequentially, as a result of another offense, and they were found to be in possession, which as of soon here, it is no longer an offense.
Right. Thank you. Your assault numbers there, I just wonder, is there any chance that you have something a little more granular other than the assault category? Does that include, is that everything? Is that assault from top to bottom, from common assault to aggravated, or is it all lumped into one category? I'd love to know if, there's mostly common assaults and a very small number, or sorry, mostly one category of assault versus a different category of assault. It would concern me if we had a greater number of CBH assaults as opposed to common assaults, I guess, is the question. I'm not sure if you have something a little more specific.
I don't have that readily available. No, it's been grouped into the one.
Because it is alarming, and so I'm just.
It is alarming. Yeah, I can certainly bring that back to council next time.
I don't specifically need that, but I just wonder if you were in possession of something in front of you there. The mental health side, I think it's laudable to move towards a mental health team. Do you, in your chair, have any insight as to the recent provincial government announcements and putting together holistic mental health teams in certain communities and strategically placing them throughout the province? Are there any discussions in that regard for our region?
I know they've done that in Victoria, and they've named a number of other communities. We have not been named in that initial grouping. Not to say that I think they're going to assess it. And when we reached out to the province, as we wanted to start this, get prepared to start up this mental health team, we asked that very question, and we were told that we would have to wait 6 months for the study. That was about 2 months ago. We have to wait to see what the results are from these teams, even though these teams have existed for years. They're all over the Lower Mainland. So, I mean, I think we know that they work. We know that there's huge benefits to it, but the province wants to wait for this particular study until they have the numbers back, probably another 4 months.
Thank you. So that's an area where we on this side of the table can help lobby our provincial counterparts. The other one was the prolific offender management strategies announced with much fanfare by the provincial government. Is there any word as far as this region benefiting from one of those prolific offender management teams?
Again, I haven't heard anything on that as well.
Thank you. Just in closing, Superintendent, I am a strong supporter of the detachment, the way it's structured, the way it's operated, the tireless work of the men and women front lines and in the specialty units, of whom many I know quite well. But so my hat goes off to you guys, and I would dare say that quibbling over 875 versus 900 and what our actual population is, it's really chump change. I believe we should be strongly supporting the detachment because it's very much cost effective, and I believe it delivers a good service to our community here specifically, let alone the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I'm trying to find a way to be very honest and describe what some of the roadblocks are to us being on the same page. So I remember our conversations last term around increasing our police numbers. But the difficulty that I've had has been in connecting with you and your department, mostly, and it's not just you, there's a long history. I recognize that you're a very busy detachment with a lot of requests for service, but in 20 years, maybe there's been 1 or 2 meetings of the Family Court and Youth Justice Committee that's ever seen an officer from the West Shore. And despite, attempts, but other things are getting in the way. The other historical thing that's gone on is that when we have approved more officers, we've been unable to realize them being brought here. And I know you've struggled with this, so did all of your predecessors that I had the pleasure to work with. And the only time we really get to talk shop with you seems to be at budget time. So, we do the budget, we send out, our request for the number of officers, and we don't really see you again till next year, sort of thing. I mean, we see you occasionally here and there, but we don't have really a good communication system working. So I'm just naming it. I'm not trying to solve it here tonight, or I'm just saying this is an issue. And there is a traditional tension between competing neighborhood municipalities here, which you very politely mentioned. And there was a tacit agreement at our table that if Langford at that time was going to go ahead and make their unilateral decisions for how many officers they were funding, that when we looked at the equation, we would look at that and we'd say, okay, well, I can see they want the headlines. They're saying that they're hiring these new officers. Good for them. We'll put the support workers in place. So that is that metric that you identified, that we have put forth our contribution, and our contribution was those support people to make those officers have the supports that they need. So somehow we've got to come together. Our numbers aren't increasing as quickly as were anticipated. that was a topic that was kind of a topic of debate here at the table. And there was a strong belief that we were going to realize large increases in our population, and we have increased, but not as quickly as we had anticipated. So to get to that point, we're going to have to find a new way to communicate because the reality is if we approve numbers of officers, but then are not included in planning or implementation or working relationships through committees or statistics or something, then it doesn't appear to be making a big difference. We're just talking budget at that point in time. So I'm just looking to solve our problem, because we can't solve our problem if we don't honestly talk about what our problem might be. So I understand and I want us to have a strong RCMP that focuses and is able to work proactively on preventive measures as well as meet the needs of the community when it happens. And we're going to probably have to get there slowly, because honestly, we don't really do big swings well, none of us. You know, incremental change always is more achievable. So I'm hoping that you can help us to find a way that works for you, because I don't want to derail your day at your workplace. There may be times that aren't going to work for you, but let's try to find some ways that we can get these conversations working with our citizens involved and make it a beneficial arrangement so that we feel trust and partnership.
If I could jump in, I probably see Machosen and Highlands more than I see this council. I've asked no less than a dozen times to be included in coming and being invited to council in the last probably 18 months. I go to View Royal once a month for Committee of the Whole. I do protective services at Langford. I go to Machosen as and when required, usually 2-3 times a year. I go to the Highlands 2-3 times a year. And you're absolutely right. And I've asked umpteen times, would you like me to come? I'd be happy to come once a month. Do you have a protective services committee? Do you have a committee of the whole? I would love to come and give you updates. I think it's important. In some of the other communities, I will literally turn my chair and have an open dialogue with anybody in the gallery. I'm happy, we're transparent, happy to answer and hear any concerns. I haven't been invited to this council on a regular basis. And you're absolutely right. It's usually around this time of year that I get invited to come here. And I've asked to come, by the way. I just have not been put on the agenda or invited. So,
Well, that's good news. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that is great news. And I think, respectfully to Councillor Day, who has the wisdom of experience and having sat through this, obviously I'm a new councillor. We see that across the border in Langford. We see new mayors in all 3 chairs. And, we can look to the past and talk about some of the historical challenges, but I see a very great working relationship, a great structure in place right now with the RCMP, probably leading the way in terms of community partnership. And, I want to see that continue. I think, at the end of the day, if we put all of the history and politics aside, we have to do what's best for our residents, and keeping this community safe. And one of the safest in our region is paramount. And, I think what we have in front of us is an opportunity to change some of those historical, grievances, if you will, and reset a relationship with this many new people in all of the different seats. I know the mayors meet on a very regular basis. There's probably an opportunity to do something there. Not that I'm trying to play matchmaker here, but I really do think there's an opportunity to move forward. So I would certainly say, you know, Superintendent Preston, if you know, myself personally, I think that that there's good times ahead in the sense that we can, you know, we can really forge a new working relationship between all of the new folks that are out there. I do have a question more for Jen, perhaps, or Mr. Earl, on the impact right now of funding an additional officer. If you've done those calculations, or if it's something you, I imagine you have them in your back pocket somewhere. At the end of the day, I just want to know what the bottom line is.
Through the chair, happy to comment on that at this point. There's a number of cost pressures that I will be highlighting when we go through the operating budget. Excuse me. But in general, a new officer, all in contractual obligation is approximately $200,000. Heard at the beginning of service review, 1% tax increase gives you about $180,000. So 1.1% tax increase to support an additional officer. If an additional is introduced in a singular year. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'll give you another turn. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just forgot one thing, and it's something that I'm working on. So I'm just going to share it with everybody here. And that is, there are two pandemics. One is COVID. The other is addictions. And addiction is a health issue. It is not just a drug problem or a police problem. It's a health issue. So I'm working myself to reframe the way that I talk about that, to try to realize that. So when we're talking about mental health, we're also recognizing the health issue that leads to substance abuse. So I'm just sharing that so that maybe we can all try to move forward in that direction, because the only way to solve that problem is to treat it in the right way.
Thank you very much for the comment. I'll just, no other person has got their hand up, so I just thought I'd step in here right now. So this is how I see life right now. You know, I remember the days of the fighting between the municipalities. It was so flippin' bad, deciding the number of you know, we didn't have a cop per pop that everyone agreed on, and it was terrible. And it's just bad relationships. And so I know I sat at the one meeting where I saw all three mayors agree with the numbers and, you know, what the ratios were going to be. They all agreed. I wish we wrote an MOU, to tell you the truth, in hindsight, because it was all stated. Some of the council members were there because we were over at the fire hall over in View Royal, and everyone agreed and shook hands on it. And it was a happy life. You know, I thought it was a good marriage. And I guess my only problem is that if one of us fails to live up to what we said we've committed to right now, you know, all of a sudden, you know, we say, oh, we don't like this ratio, and we're going to go to 1 to 950 or whatever we choose. Then View Royal is going to get mad because they're going to think that we're compensating for them, or what are the municipality. I couldn't believe Langford stepped in and said 1 to 750. Great, you know. So in essence, they're offsetting some of our costs. So I thought it was a good marriage, and the way I look at it, being very analytical about this, I mean, there is no other formula for this right now at this point in time. Maybe someone's going to invent one and have this great formula, you know, and really solve our problems for us right now. But this is what we have, and it is what it is. And so I took the time to actually, I normalized your data, and your numbers are actually worse. I mean, because you only went to November. So I normalized by taking the average of the year and, you know, by month, and then added it on to for December number In actual fact, the numbers are worse than what you're stating. So you're conservative. And so the other thing that I looked at was I was interested when I saw those Kelowna numbers and looking at their population. And I think we're getting a good deal, to tell you the truth. That's how I see it, just, on a cop per pop basis right now, right? So, and I guess to Councillor Ward's position on this, public safety is a job of council. And I certainly don't want to be the person that says, well, I'm going to cut it just to save money and then, and suffer the consequences of doing something like this right now. I just see things, the pressures are getting higher. I see more of the urban crime that's happening downtown Victoria. It's making its way out here into the West Shore. It's a reality. We're seeing it now. And just have to go down the Galloping Goose now. And I actually seen homeless people for a change. I didn't think they existed. When someone asked me, oh, we don't have that problem. And then I've seen it now. So I guess that's my perspective on this. And I know that, the 1 to 875 has been used, and it was used in everything that we've been presented to date, the Colliers, everyone seemed to nod. And so now the numbers changed a little bit. So I don't have the right solution. And I think we have to go with what we've agreed upon until someone comes up with a different formula. And when that happens, great stuff. But for now, we're getting more pressure. We've got a lot of speeding on our roads, and we're demanding more. And you made the offer, now give me your 5 hot spots, and we'll look after it. And so as far as I remember last year, I remember the discussions, was one extra per year. That's what I remembered. I just remember that sort of stuck in my head. So even using the 2021 census data of the 18,971, I think it was, or 61. I mean, it says you should have another comp. It says that. So I guess that's where I'm sitting at right now. I'm just trying to look at this as logical as possible, understanding the extra services that have to happen. And so I don't have a problem with this. This is fully justifiable to me. And I don't want we've got a good, our public safety record isn't bad from what I can see looking at other municipalities. But I'd certainly hate to see that change just because we decided that, and we become fractious out here in the West Shore all of a sudden again, and we destroy something that, we've maintained, and so I'm very, very conscious of that. So I would be supportive of the one officer, I mean, yeah, maybe you saying 2 by the new, by the other estimates of population, but you're asking for 1. I think it's sort of a great compromise. So that's how I see it, and I just look at analytical data, and, you can't look at it in this way either, because I remember when I was in the military, one of the things that we were responsible for was search and rescue. And you try to, and then in the days when I was in there, always looking at cutbacks, cut back everything. And, how do you measure how many search and rescue specialists do you need? It's the same sort of thing. And then when someone arbitrarily comes in and says, you're going to cut this. And so when it came to we had multiple search and rescue missions that we had to accomplish. We couldn't meet them because we didn't have the people. So how do you measure that? So I'm very conscious of that. And I lean towards this because, if the data was going a different way right now, maybe we should look at flattening it right now, but the data doesn't show that. So that's what's driving, where my head is right. Well,
I appreciate your comments, Your Worship.
Your Worship, if I may,
Yes, please.
just for numbers perspective, so adding an additional officer from the current plan of 20.6 to 21.6 with the current estimate of population would take us to 1 to 920 ratio from a current 1 to 980 ratio.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison.
I just had a question about the COP to POP ratio, in the document that you gave us, Superintendent Preston. It says 875 for 2023 and 2024, and then we go down to 850. Is that just, what is that based on? Like, how does? Yeah.
Oops, you have to push your mic on.
I apologize. I said, when you look at Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Victoria, when you look at, just on the pendulum completely swung, as you increase your density, your police typically, almost always needs to increase with the densification. And so if you look at that, Langford is between 40 and 50,000. They're at 1 to 750. Once you hit 25,000, again, these are 20,000. It goes to 1 to 850. By my calculations, you actually do meet in 5 years. My numbers must be different than Mr. Earl's there, because you do hit 24.6, and my calculations that even at 1 to 850, based on the numbers that you could provide with a 2.5% increase, are exactly where you need to be. So somebody's numbers perhaps are off a little bit, but I don't think I'm not asking for any more than what we had before, because I think that will get you where you need to be. And as we said before, there's no exact science to this, but it gets you real close in an area where I think the other municipalities are all the same way. Everybody knows that it's going to be very close. And some years you're going to enjoy an extra 2 or 3% policing that you're going to steal off of one of the other or use off one of the other team members. And then the next year you're going to be on the other end of that. So,
Yeah.
so you're to your point. Yes, it's a graph. Did you see that there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess I just further side, I just wanted to understand. So we're basing it on this graph, the 2.5% estimate. And do we ever really look at the the real numbers when we have them, like the real population numbers?
What we
at
have
some
been
point?
doing for consistency is we said, now, again, this is something that the councils, and we had a police board with the other ones, or CAOs, you could all ratify this and make it very clean and easy. What I did is I said, well, just use the national census numbers. And that was the basis line, because we know that everybody's the same on that. And then it's basically, you tell me on the honor system how much you're increasing every year. And is it every 4 years we have a census? Is it every 4 years we can reconcile the number and get back to where you need to be? So, I mean, it's the honor system at that point.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just wanted to say that I'm supportive of increasing for another officer at this point too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship. Great discussion, and I'm just going to actualize this. I think, Mr. Mayor, based on your dialogue and same with Councillor Georgeson, but I want to make it a two-part motion. One, that we move our ratio to 1 to 875, and we solidify that. The second part of that motion would be that we fund an actual officer in 2023. That's my motion. I'm happy to motivate.
Your worship, if I may,
Please. Go ahead,
Uh,
Mr. Earl.
the second part of that motion doesn't achieve the first part of that motion.
It depends on which census you use though, right? And so the census that I know of right now is the last one was 2021, and that's at 18,961, if I'm not mistaken. And so the next official census is 2025. That is my understanding.
So that is correct. In the Colwood has historically, in between federal censuses, used BC Stats. BC Stats estimates based on CMHC data about housing completions. And so they look at the housing completion data, not the housing starts, and they estimate population of communities. And Colwood is lucky that we're one of the communities that CMHC does that deep dive on. It's administration's expectation and estimate that 19,857 is our 23 population. If you add an officer, divide it by that, I believe you get to around 920. And so if you'd like us to get to 875, it would be greater than one officer.
Mr. Mayor, if I could,
Please.
when we established these numbers, to be transparent and fair, we used the the national census, which is less. So it would be unfair to council to then come to you and say, this is the number that we should use. If we set these numbers based on the lesser number. So although I hate to talk myself out of more resources,
1 point something.
I believe it's the right thing to do because that's what we did at the time.
So I think we can frame my motion so that it works, Mr. Earl, but firstly, the first part that we fund an officer in 2023, the second that we move the community to 1 to 875 ratio. I'm not attaching a timeline to that. It's a philosophical motion in the sense that we are agreeing with what's stated here, as have the rest of the other communities in the West Shore. That's my motion, Your Worship, if I'm happy to motivate.
Okay. It is, Mr. Earl, it is, we just did the calculation based on the the national census. The 18,961 divided by 875 is 21.6. Okay, just so they put, just before I let you, I'll just let Councillor Day and Councillor Ward have, and then I'll come back to you for the motion.
Should we get a seconder and then move to?
Okay, sure. We can do that. Could I get a seconder to that, please? Okay. Councillor Jordison seconds that, and I'll open it up for discussion. Now, discussion on the motion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So my difficulty with the motion is that when we're talking cop per pop, we have forgotten about the support workers. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, our stats here talking about police strength do not take into account the auxiliary workers that we have funded to match other municipalities' police FTE contributions. So when Langford added 4 officers and we added support people to support those 4 officers. So that's where, for me, there are 2 problems. One is realizing actually being able to hire and put warm bodies in place. And the other is ensuring that the administrative support is there in the building, that we don't undervalue the support people who are needed to make that work happen. We started tonight's discussion with Inspector Preston saying we actually do have one more body that we're not really counting in the equation, because we have, I think it's 3 support staff that we fund through Colwood. 2? Yeah.
2.3.
Well, I think our discussions talked about those 2, but I was here when we put the very first ones in place, recognizing that, it would be more efficient to have the tasks that can be accommodated by somebody who hasn't gone through all that extra training to carry a firearm and deal with dangerous situations. It's more cost effective for all of our municipalities to have support staff there to assist our officers.
So you do to that end, and I know we spoke to previous councils about that. Efficiencies, I completely appreciate on that side of the fence when you're looking to try to justify money to constituents. And again, you raise another very good point, Councillor Day, and we talked about it before. We have a number of civilian staff that are doing what normally was done by regular members. So to have a $200,000 member reading files, I mean, there has to be some oversight and supervision when somebody calls and we read a file. 90% of those files do not need much supervision. So what we've done is we actually hired 6 retired sergeants and staff sergeants, both from Victoria Police Department and the majority of them from the RCMP. They work in our building. They review what normally was done by the staff sergeant watch commander. So you have a $200,000 and arguably your most knowledgeable individual sitting there reading files. Gross inefficiency. So that's where we have these readers. We pay them, I think it's $38 an hour. They work 3 on 6 off, which is a perfect retirement gig. And that allows our staff sergeant to be on the road, providing the mentorship, the guidance, and the leadership that's necessary. And it creates a huge efficiency. We also have a in-house analyst that's a municipal employee. That individual, we were sending off computers, phones, all this stuff to Green Timbers, to Vancouver. We were getting huge bills because we have members and specialized techs over there that were costing us a fortune. We hired that individual. We do all that in-house now. So all these things that you're saying about realizing efficiencies and trying to find those things, we are doing them and we are looking for them every day to try to save and squeeze every dollar, every tax dollar for you.
For sure. So I just want to make sure that when we're looking at our police strength and our ratios, that those specialized, very valuable support staff are not forgotten in that ratio.
In the equation, the cost equation is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yes, and you are correct. And as I said, it would be 2 members right now to get you where you need to be. But if you do 1 plus your 2 Emmys, you're still, I guarantee you're still ahead. And over the 4 or 5 years, whatever, to 2026, it actually normalizes itself. And there is an opportunity here. There's nothing says that mayor and council and committee members can't work with your other partners and ratify that sooner. And make sure that, if somebody else owes more in that regard and less somewhere else, that we can reconcile all that. And I would encourage, we never had that before. That's the piece that we're missing. And you talked about having a committee of some sort so we don't fracture the relationship. We keep this thing. You have the best relationship in the province, without question. It's the most complex detachment. I think I told you that yesterday. The province has reiterated that this is the most complex detachment in the province. You have the most savings.
So is there anything that we need here to recognize that in this ratio?
If you look at the cop per pop ratio, the average cop to pop across the province, I think that speaks volumes. The average cop to pop is 1 to 758, I believe it was on that sheet. Yeah. 754. Yeah. And we're doing this at 1 to 875. I think that's the realization that that's your cost savings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward?
Yeah, I would say that I support the first part of the motion by Councillor Jansen to add 1 police officer. The second thing, that I note is that, just in defense of that, if I'm talking to the taxpayer on a cost per capita basis, which really is a great equalizer for me across the province, we're the 5th lowest there. So, we're getting good value in my opinion. I'm not a subject matter expert, but I'm a numbers person and that speaks to me. I would, as I'm prone to do, I'm going to make a habit of potentially amending the motion. I think there's an opportunity, and I think, Mr. Mayor, you said it earlier that there's no MOU or anything in place. And what I see here is an opportunity. If you recall last night, it wasn't that long ago, ourselves and View Royal have already voted to put the 3 mayors and 3 CAOs in the room together, provided Langford, when they finally get around to it, agrees. I see no reason why we can't leverage that and suggest that we have the current mayors and CAOs put this into a formal memorandum of understanding, put something on paper to document what really is a proverbial handshake agreement. And move forward on that. So I would amend the motion to do that, to add the police officer now, and then task the 3 mayors and CEOs as part of the
It's
police
actually
state steering
before now,
committee to that.
because the.
Oh, and
the
chosen as
is
well.
now
Sorry.
included.
4 mayors and CAOs to come together and properly define the working agreement that the municipalities have on shared services here, so that there is something that's probably long overdue in place.
If I could, I would absolutely, I would relish that if you would do that, because I've been the cheese and the sandwich here for the last 4 years. And really, this is not my job. I mean, and I'm happy to do it for you, but it's not my job to deliver, to establish the level of service that you guys want. Yeah, I know. So I'm happy to continue to do it, but this is, it's fantastic if it was taken out of a, like you said, a behind the scenes type of deal. It was formalized, ratified, whatever, whatever is deemed necessary. And again, you would then, I truly believe you'd be the envy of many communities when they talk about integration and enjoying efficiencies. This is the flagship. I've worked in a lot of places across Western Canada, and I can say that with certainty.
Just gonna ask that, Mr. Earl, is it something that do you have meetings with your fellow CEOs? Is it an issue that you can bring up then? I can bring it up with the West Shore mayors, that's for sure. We meet every 6 or 7 weeks for lunch, but.
Yes, we meet regularly and we talk about common service delivery, RCMPs, always on the table for that. It would be helpful for administration if you could give us some guidance as to the pace to get from current year would be 920 to 875. Is that over? And administration continues to believe that council would like us to estimate population lift every year and not continue to use the last federal census for the 5-year period, but every year to make an estimate of what we believe our population to be, which means we need to recalculate this every year.
Okay. Yeah, a great question. It's to our advantage right now because we're using 2021 census. But yeah, I guess we're gonna have to figure that one out and how we do that, because we would all have to do it the same way, right? I would tend to think, it's maybe BC stats or whatever, instead of just trusting each other here. But I think there's got to be a common ground, some ground rules that have to be established.
Your worship, if you use the BC stats, you'll have to you like to have to rejig that cop to pop, and it would be like more or less, depends how you look at it. It'd be like 1 to 900 or 1 to 880 or whatever it is, because the provincial numbers tend to be higher. And like I said, we set these numbers on the federal numbers.
Right.
So, again, we would be, the RCP would obviously be the benefactor if we did it the way you're talking about. If we use the provincial numbers, you're going to be higher, which means you're going to require more officers. And that wasn't the intention. The intention is to, now, if, like I said, we're more than happy. I mean, I'm happy to do it either way. It just, to be fair to everybody, you'd have to rejig it to adjust for a higher number, so a lower cop to pop ratio.
Thank you. So may I suggest this, Mr. Earl, that maybe we could take it as an action. I can bring it up to the mayors. If you bring it up with the CAOs, it's a 2-prong attack. And instead of trying to, let's give them the options. I guess we could talk about that after, what options we can provide. And so we're not fixed on 1 to 875, because if we do use like we say that the BC stats, it's higher. And so you might want to play around with the ratio. Otherwise, we're falling out of guidelines already right from the start. So that worries me a little bit. So Is that I don't know how you put that in a motion though. So
Thank you, worship. And I don't want to muddy the waters, and I think it's a great discussion, but this discussion keeps going on. And my fear is that it slips off the side of the table at the end of the year here, and we're having the same discussion 12 months from now.
Yeah.
So I would love for us to see this move forward. If it's an action item as far as a motion goes, I think then it has, increases the I don't know.
Yeah.
As opposed to, and not that I believe that you guys can't get the job done, because I do believe you can. But you moving forward with some kind of motion framed accordingly, I get it. There's some discrepancy in the numbers, BC stats, what have you. But this 875 that's in here from the other communities, what's that based on, Superintendent?
Sorry, they're all based on the national numbers.
Okay.
It's
So
all,
then
it's all
it sounds to
consistent. So if
me-
you stay with the national numbers, you're consistent. If you move to the province, you're gonna have to just adjust the cop to
So-
pop. If you use the national numbers, which is every 4 years,
Yeah.
you just have to provide an estimate, an honest estimate to each community each year, and then you reconcile that in 4 years.
So I don't care how the cat gets skinned, quite frankly, I really don't. But and I think some of those details we can kick to you, Mr. Mayor. But in essence, what I see before me right here, I would like to lock this in at 875 based on the federal census. If we choose to nibble around the edges in your discussions with neighboring communities, I'm fine with that. But I would like to solidify the motion as it's written, which is 875 for the federal census numbers. If moving forward, we choose to refine that a little bit further and adjust it, that's fine. But
here's the problem,
Yeah.
Councillor Jensen. If you do it just based on the federal census, that doesn't happen until for every 4 years. So that means we leave the number for the next 4 years at 21.6.
so
That's what's going to happen.
so
if we lock
I get what
ourselves
you're
into that
saying,
number.
but surely the federal government offers some kind of metric or go ahead, Rob. I can see it in your face.
Your worship, administration's belief is that given the nature of this conversation, the budget will include an additional officer every year. And depending on the scale and pace of our growth, we may or may not hit 875 within the financial plan.
Councillor Day, you have something to add to this?
Yeah, just on the census issue alone and how to incorporate that. If we use the national census and it's only done every 4 years, we're going to be able to get it right in year 1 of that cycle. In year 2, we can have an estimate based on what we know about our community, and that money can either be invested into the police resource that we may or may not need. And if it isn't invested into the police resource, we can put that into a reserve fund, which we already have established, and then access that in the following year when we again are going to have an estimate in year 3. And then in year 4, we're going to get our validity because that we're into another census year. If I'm reading that correctly, year 1, you have numbers, year 2, you estimate, year 3, you estimate, and then year 4, you have numbers again. So I don't think it's impossible to manage. We already have those things set up within the city. We can justify our numbers to our neighbors so that we can stand up to the agreement that's either a handshake deal or maybe we're able to realize an actual MOU on that.
So
Go ahead.
sorry, thank you, Your Worship. I saw my mic was still on.
Yeah, conversation, dialogue, right?
Thank you, my fellow council member. I mean, I got lost in there somewhere, quite frankly, but I think what you're suggesting probably makes perfect sense. But I want to solidify this once and for all and send the mayor forward and the chief administrator with marching orders backed by a motion that is concrete, that has a number attached to it. I get it gets a little murky on what numbers we're going to use, but that's what I'm hoping can be resolved with your discussions. So my motion stands as worded, and to my fellow councillor Ward's amendment. I had a thought. I can't even remember what your amendment was, but I felt that it maybe muddied it a little bit further, and maybe a separate motion might be appropriate. I'm getting a nod from Marcy that might be cleaner if we just steer clear of that. So my motion stands, and it's moving to 1 to 875 based on the federal census and a new officer for 2023, with the caveat that there might be some adjustments as discussions occur with, ongoing discussions with neighboring municipalities. But these other communities have gone to 875, and we should do the same. Instead, we're going around and around in circles. That's my motion, Your Worship. I think it's been seconded.
Yeah,
I would like
seconded
to,
already. Yeah.
I would like to move it forward. Thank you.
We're still in discussion on the motion anyways. Council Ward.
Yeah, I can appreciate where Councillor Jensen's coming from and Councillor Day's suggestions. To me, to lock in at a specific number without meeting with our counterparts and defining it further doesn't make sense. I agree, though, that we need a timeline. I would be happy to, have a definitive timeline for the mayors and CAOs to come back. And we could put some parameters in there that the baseline would be using the federal census moving forward. But I think in terms of the actual calculations, what rates are applied to that? Is it a consistent rate across all three communities in terms of the off years? Is it, municipal growth rates, which could vary by municipality? That's a discussion that has to have between that steering committee. I think you can't lock yourselves in on a formula at this table. We could go around and around in circles trying to find the right formula. But I'm happy to support, like I say, the first half of the motion, but I don't think I can lock in at 875 right now. So I hear you. I'm happy to clean this up.
Oh. Okay. Please go ahead, Councillor Jensen. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. We'll get to, I promise you're next.
I'll be very brief. I want to clean this up. Okay, I'm going to withdraw the portion of my motion that speaks to the officer to population. And I want to leave it at another officer for 2023. I think, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chief Administrator, you got the point from the discussion from this table, and I do take Councillor Ward's point, and I apologize to Councillor Jordison.
Are you okay with, as a seconder on that motion, with withdrawing the second portion? Yeah. Oh, it's Councillor Jordison. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I've just withdrawn a portion.
Okay, so my only question is there not some way every year at a certain specific time that we get the information of our population from someone that's relatively close to where we are?
Please, Mr. Earl.
BC Stats does an estimate, and we have historically used BC Stats estimate to inform this process.
So sorry, if we use BC Stats right now, we're this is based on the census, or like for 2023, if we would be.
Yeah.
So the federal document doesn't work, okay? Because obviously it's too low, right? So we should just that needs to go. We can't use that information because that's.
Yeah, we can't, because that's what's everyone's established on. Right
Okay,
now.
that's,
Yeah.
well, okay, so that's what everybody's established on. But to be fair to the RCMP detachment, and to be fair to what we should have for staffing in that regard, we should be using more modern, up-to-date data. So maybe that's a discussion we can have, but I feel like Councillor Jansen, if we leave the table tonight and we disagree to give to the extra staffing, that we're not fixing that other issue, and we're hoping that it gets resolved somehow. So I don't know how to fix that either. Yeah, so can we add to the motion that, yeah, that. Oh, sorry. You've added that part? So
Well, the amended motion said.
No, let's, can I go to Marcy?
yes, you
Marcy,
can go.
can you please tell me what is the motion on the table? right
And just as a reminder, when you're speaking, you don't have your mics on, so anybody listening virtually can't hear. So the actual motion that I believe is still there, moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Jordison, was to fund one additional officer in 2023. And I also believe that Councillor Ward was trying to put forward another secondary motion, or am I correct? And yours was that the 4 mayors and 4 CAOs work towards formalizing a memorandum of understanding on shared services for the RCMP. But we do not have a seconder on that motion.
Yeah. So what I'll do, because he didn't have a seconder, it's a separate motion. Okay, so we're gonna have the motion on the first motion, which is on the 1 extra RCMP officer. One motion, okay? So is there any further discussion on the 1 extra officer? Okay, I am gonna call the question on that one. All in favor? And it's unanimous. Okay, so secondary motion, please. Councillor Ward.
All right, I would like to make a motion, and feel free to amend it, Councillor Jansen, if you'd like. That I think, Marcy, you have the words already, but the 4 mayors and 4 CAOs as part of the steering committee or independent of the steering committee for the RCMP building, examine the prepare a draft memorandum of understanding and report back to the respective councils within a reasonable time frame. Let's add that on there.
Your worship, if I may,
Mr. Earl,
I have
please.
no intention of muddying the issue. There are 3 owners of the building. And so the building conversations have typically been limited to those 3. If the conversation is beyond building, separate relative to this issue, then ignore that last comment.
And may I step in and just say that strike from there any reference to the building steering committee, just say the 4 mayors, 4 CAOs meet as a committee to investigate, well, to report on a memorandum of understanding that they bring back to the respective councils.
We don't have a committee, though.
We can create a committee. Let's form a committee. Formally or informally, the 8 people can get together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can do it without a committee. That's what my whole point is right now.
Should we also move that Superintendent Preston has to be there as well, a 3rd night in a row? I mean, do we have clarity though on what we're looking for? I mean, the 4 CAOs, 4
I do.
mayors get together.
Are you okay?
Formalize the
Are you okay
process.
with that, Mr. Earl? Okay, perfect. Okay, so can I get a seconder on that motion? Councillor Olson. Any just further discussion on this? I heard that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Your worship and council, thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate it. Before I leave, I do want to reiterate my willingness to come as little or as much as you'd like to this council. Like I said, this is the council that I see the least, and I've made that known in the past there that I would be happy to come once a month or whatever you'd like. And normally what I do is I come in and I give you a kind of a snapshot of the calls for service that we've had in your area. So you're keenly aware of some of the, more significant and even the less significant files. But I am, like I said, I'm certainly happy to do that at any point. If you're
What's your
happy.
normal reporting period when you collect all the data?
We do it bi-yearly is what we were sending out. Twice a year you'll get it. But like I said, when I go to View Royal, for instance, I bring the analyst, we have a criminal analyst, and she compiles all of the stats and the files for the month. And I come there and I deliver that.
Okay.
And I don't do it, I see View Royal the most out of everybody. Langford probably the second, although I don't see them a ton, but they have a protective services committee that I report to. And then, like I said, the other two communities, I literally probably see them more than I see this council for some reason.
So as I spoke to you, I would love to see you quarterly come before council. That would, as a minimum to start off with, that would be great, I think anyways. But we can meet as often as we want. We can always go for lunch or coffee. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like I said, the idea is seeing each other more. Then I can hear back about, things like the traffics. Here's an area, it's a concern that you're hearing from your constituents. I'll deal with it. Your school zones, your school, whatever issues you have. It's just I do agree with Councillor Day that I would like to see better communication, bilateral communication here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grove?
Is that an expectation that we should add here? The quarterly visit, so we can.
Yeah.
I think we should add that.
So we can add that to our expectations.
Yes. Thank you. That's
And improve this communication thing, which I find that quite astounding that this has occurred, but no matter, we'll fix it or we'll change it. And then I was assuming that we are increasing the service, not maintaining.
We'll get that in a second.
So
Yeah, that's next.
thank you. Thank you very much. Shall I make the motion then to increase service? Should I do that?
Well, I'll let Mr. Earl
Oh.
lead us into it and then we'll do the motion. Okay, Mr. Earl, back to you. please.
Councillor Grove was way ahead. Administration are seeking a recommendation to approve the draft 23 priorities and an increased level of service based on the conversation this evening.
Okay, make the motion. Councillor Grove, second. Councillor Ward, discussion. Oh, Councillor Jensen. I thought you wanted to go home.
Just like to say good night. No, just kidding. Thank you. And thank you to staff for putting up with us. But Jen, can you just speak a little bit? Because I know just so we increase perhaps our comfort level. I mean, a lot of times we end up forecasting these things and it really hits the bottom line for really only a small portion of the year by the time we order up amount of policemen. So are we looking at a full officer hitting us in the 2023 budget year, or do we actualize that when the officer actually hits the ground? Or
Thank you for that question through the chair. Yes, I didn't want to skip without talking about the financial implications of what's been discussed tonight. So page 11 of 11, operating budget. So to be direct, we do prorate based. We authorize at January 1st. We fund at April 1st, equivalent to their fiscal year. Preface this by saying, so as you heard earlier tonight, this is a contractual relationship depending on our population. So currently over 15,000, we're responsible for 90% for the most part. There's certain costs we're responsible for 100%. But for the most part, we are responsible for 90% of the policing costs. We budget based on our observation of what actualizes. So we budget at about 85%. So I want to highlight that for the room, because for those of you who haven't sat through these budget conversations before, there is a little revenue that is generated in this area. So specifically, we've had conversations recently with respect to the detachment facility. So we do generate and recognize our proportionate share between the 3 member munis of lease revenue generated in this area. Those lease rates and the formula that derives those lease rates has been under review and discussion for some time now. I am of the belief that the current budget, those are based on revenues that we were receiving back in 2019. So there's a little risk there. As you can see, we're projecting that we're going to collect about $55,000 in detachment lease revenue. We're pending the outcome of those conversations, so that may impact us in the future. Moving into contracted policing services. So the 2022 approved budget authorized strength of 20.6 members. We've actualized at approximately 19. Moving into the approved 23 budget, as you heard, it was an additional member per year. So that approved 23 budget was for 21.6. The current draft, and so the background to budgetary increases that you were introduced to with this service review inception, was a member strength of 20.6. Support services and building, that funding primarily represents both the municipal support staff as well as our proportionate share of the building operating costs. I will pause. I do see Councillor Ward has his microphone on.
Okay, that's Councillor Ward.
Yeah, sorry to interject, just for my own reference and for future, I think in understanding the rules around this. When, take for example, say parks, just as an example, we population grows, we add people to maintain a service level. So we're voting to maintain a service level. In a hypothetical world, and I don't always like to do whataboutism, but if this agreement, rather than a handshake sort of agreement, had been a formal contractual obligation to reach the 1 to 875 level, in essence, what we've done here to increase would in fact just be defined as maintaining. Is that right? Or because if your population is increasing and therefore you're required to add a police officer to stay within your contracted levels of service, you would in theory then just be maintaining service levels. And that's not the case, obviously I understand now, but had this hypothetically been a formal agreement, like a contractual obligation instead of a handshake deal, would that not be how we define it? Or am I wrong?
It's true. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of semantics where if we were at 1 to 875 and we added an officer to stay at 1 to 875, then yes, we would describe that as maintenance. As you've seen, we're last year we were probably 1 to 980, and so increasing an officer will drop us to closer to 1 to 920. And as we continue that progression to 875, we are receiving additional policing services per capita. And so we will describe that as increased level of service until we hit that level, and then it would be maintained.
Yeah, okay, it's just the definition. I was curious. Thank you.
So while you're interrupted right now, so last year when we approved, we did the draft 2023 budget. I swear we approved an extra body in it already. So you're saying that's not in there now, or is it in there? I'm confused now.
Correct. And so this is all highlighted within the service profile. So authorized strength approved for 22 was 20.6.
Right.
Last year, the authorized strength approved for 2023 was an additional to 21.6.
Right.
The actualized strength for 2022 was about 19. So that factor, along with some other factors, primarily the conversations surrounding the policing building, were some of the reasons that this plan has been brought forward as it has. In addition, the growth. So if we made the assumption that the existing strength level was appropriate, the growth that drove the one additional officer a year is not actualizing to that same level. That growth of 900 residents a year is actualizing at closer to 500, the 2.5%. And that's from the BC statistics information.
Sure. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
And so as we move into new service levels, 2023, the previous approved budget, two primary cost factors to consider, the additional one in strength, as well as the e-com dispatch. And so when we were in budget deliberations a year ago, the information we had at the time was an expectation that we would be responsible for partial funding starting in 2023. Since that time, we've received updated information. To quote, there's been transition funding put in place until April 1st, 2025. So if you look along, the 25 draft budget proposes the introduction of the cost approximately $400,000. That represents 3/4 of the year for 25, and then moving into full year tax implications of a little over $500,000 to support what we've been told will be our cost share, which is a little under 8% of the e-com costing. Lastly, you've heard us speak about this with previous discussions regarding the detachment facility. We currently do not show transfers to reserves by service area. Moving into budget deliberations, it is our intention to do so. And this draft financial plan proposes that we increase and really introduce a transfer to the police building reserve so that we can start to phase in the financial implications of our anticipated proportionate share of the estimated cost of the detachment work. And so that's an additional $325,000, the additional 1.8% property tax increase that you heard referenced. And so with that, that's my overview of this operating budget.
Any questions from council?
Your worship, can I
Please.
I just had one question here, just when you talked about not realizing the numbers, like the numbers that we have, and Mr. Earl suggested it's going to be 500. You're anticipating 500 people, correct?
So our new estimate is 500 people per annum kind of moving forward. If you straight lined it over 20 years.
So that is roughly within 10 or 20. In that document that's to you is 500. Okay, so, but yeah, I was just confused. And I'm sorry, I'm easily confused, but when you were suggesting that the numbers weren't, the population wasn't going up as fast as what was in this document. I thought that's what it was referring to. Obviously I'm wrong, because it is 500 on this document each time. So it's not what we thought it was going to be, you know, a year and a half ago. It was going to be 900 or 1,000. And so it is exactly what we thought. It's going to be 500 on this. So it's not anymore. Okay.
Jen, do you want to? Nope. Okay. Okay. See no other questions, Mr. Earl?
Sorry, just one final comment. So Ms. Hepting pointed to the poster on the right that reflects the 1.8 kind of on the left-hand side, the green box, the third number down, 1.8. That was the additional cost for policing in 2023, primarily driven by the new transfer to set aside the monies for the police building. This decision tonight to add an additional officer will add approximately 1.1 to that number. So when you see the budget, the police component will be 2.9 rather than the current 1.8.
It is what it is. Okay. We'll get to that when we talk about budgets, I guess. Councillor Day, go.
Oh, it was almost gone. Just a sec. Oh, I know. I think I know. I've lost it. Oh, I know what it was. I got it again. They're fleeting sometimes. It was about the RCMP contract review. And at one point in time, we were anticipating a large increase due to union negotiations. And I just wanted to know how that turned out and whether or not we still need to keep that in the back of our minds.
Thank you through the chair. Excellent question. So that contract has been finalized in 2021. It's early 23. We have not yet been invoiced for those costs. We have received estimates. And to be direct, we are in conversations about how those estimates are calculated and what we expect we are responsible for. To directly answer your question, we have funded what we believe will be at most our proportionate share of the result of the retroactive payment that is owed. So that has been funded. It's sitting on our books as an accrued liability. And when we do receive the invoice, there won't be a current year tax implication to that.
Thank you.
And with that, all I would like to conclude this with is we have received direction from council throughout this service review. And so that direction will be incorporated into the draft budget. And with respect to the service review documents, the service profiles themselves, those will be brought back to council for final endorsement to reflect the changes that have been proposed throughout this process. We did have a tentative meeting scheduled for this Thursday. My expectation is we don't require that unless you direct otherwise.
That's great. Thank you very much. Mr. Earl, do you want to do the wrap up here? Or do we have to have a motion on this increase or maintain or no? Oh, we did. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, geez. I was asleep at the wheel here. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn then, please? Okay, Councillor Grove, thank you very much. All in favor? Perfect. Thank you very much. So was it?